All right, Canteeners, welcome back. Episode 88 for all you Dale Jr. fans out there. 88, here we go. I don't even know, dude. I don't even know. Is it NASCAR season right now? My dad's very
I
disappointed
think
in me
the
right now.
Indy 500's today, right? Indy 500's today.
I don't know. I don't follow that. My dad's very
I don't
disappointed.
either.
He's listening to this right now because he's like, he doesn't know, because I don't know if it's NASCAR season right now or not. He's just shaking his head like, what kind of son did I raise?
That's not the only reason he's disappointed. That's
That's very true. That's very true. That's just the reason, right? Like right now, it'll be different here in a couple. It'll be different here in a couple of minutes. So, yeah, no, man. Real quick, thanks to Carlton Zeus for the intro music. For those of you that are just listening to us and watching us on YouTube, definitely check us out on your favorite podcast platform so you can hear the intro music from Carlton Zeus. You also can find Carlton Zeus on Apple Music and www.carltonzeus.com. He's got a new album out. We've talked about it a few times, and it's absolutely crushing it. So go check him out, please. So Roger, dude, so we gotta rein Roger and his 3D printer in. Like we got to give him some focus, some purpose, motivation, and direction because he is creating all sorts of stuff with that damn 3D printer. What is that? A lithograph?
it's
that
a
you got?
lithophane, and much
Lithophane.
like our podcast, I make absolutely zero money with anything that I've done. So all I'm doing is buying like tons of PLA plastic and printing off stupid shit.
I love it. So, well, it's, the very first thing that you printed off your 3D printer. So funny story. So the very first thing you remember what it was, right, Roger?
I think
So,
Luke does. Luke
well,
remembers what it was.
so my kids do too. So my kids are going through our C3 Instagram and they come across this, this little, quick video on Daddy, what did Mr. Roger do with his 3D printer? What, Dad? This is not appropriate. This is not appropriate. And I was like, I didn't know what to say. Like, I can't defend that.
Or did they at least like the post? They at least like the post and share it or anything? Or
I think so. Maybe they did.
Do you guys remember what I did to Dave in the San Diego airport?
Yes, on the back.
Well, our audience doesn't. So for those of you who track us, and we're gonna keep this semi-family friendly here, but I think you all know what exactly Roger printed out when he got his 3D printer. It's a certain, I'd say PG-13 to R-rated little. Let's call it a member. He printed out a member. So we have this friend named Dave, doesn't listen to the show. He should. And anyway, we're always pranking him. One time we wrapped his car in cellophane. One time I filled up his little desk drawer up above the desk. I filled that up with ping pong balls with a little ramp. And when he opened it up, it was like probably 500 ping pong balls came down on him. And so we were in San Diego. We knew we were going back, and somebody went to an adult store and bought a little tiny member. And what we were going to do was put a nail in it, sneak it into his backpack, and that nail would go off on TSA's little x-ray machine, and he'd have to stand there while they unpacked and found this little thing in his backpack. But we were like, nah, we don't want to mess with TSA or get in trouble, like he's trying to sneak a weapon through or something. So I just made a little keychain out of it and clipped it onto his backpack with a little carabiner while he wasn't looking, walking into the airport. So if you know Dave, he's like a mix between Johnny Bravo and Hulk Hogan. Hey, brother, he's a big guy. He's intimidating. He's got the blonde hair. He's the kind of guy you wouldn't want to mess with. He's walking through with this tactical backpack with this little thing swinging all over, and we're walking like 10 steps behind him. And so the funniest thing was, he's going to go the whole trip with this on, but I don't know how it happened, but one of the little chains holding that member to the carabiner fell off, and it broke, and that member goes sliding across the floor and hits a little kid in the shoe. And the little kid looks down, looks up at his mom, and Dave looks at him, looks back at us, and his face turns like beet blood red, and he's just like he just walked away, leaving that thing sitting on the floor right there. So that was a really good prank. You ought to try that again with somebody. So, sorry to derail there, Roger, but that your little thing you printed off reminded me of that story.
No,
No, that's all right. Yeah, you should do that. You should pull that prank on some of the illegals down there that you're rounding up.
no. So you gotta now you have to tell the story of Dave and the deer urine on you. That was good.
Nah, you tell that one.
So when we were all assigned to the same organization, like Luke said, Luke, he Dave was his target, and Luke was a bully, and so and Dave, yeah, that's a perfect description of Dave as well. Like I always say, like he's like Mickey Rourke from The Wrestler. Mickey Rourke, when you look at him, it's just his mannerisms and how he talks, everything is just but at the end of the day, he's a big teddy bear. And but so Dave got Luke back, for his years of of psychological punishment. And so at the time, everybody's desk in our organization kind of looked like a science experiment. Everybody was going to the gym and everybody had no explode and creatine and protein and, all amino acids. And it was pretty ridiculous. And everybody had a shaker bottle, and it looked like when people went to the gym, you guys remember Russ in a tank top and all his, his tribal tats all over the place. I mean, it looked like a biker gang joint, daily in there when everybody went to the gym at lunchtime. And so Luke had started, you had started these new vitamins or supplements or something. And Dave had been secretly squirting just a tad of deer urine, right? Like hunters use doe urine to attract bucks. He had squirted just a very, very, tiny bit on Luke's backpack straps and his shoes. And so after a while, it started, like you could smell it, like other people could smell it. And Luke was, I remember one day you came back and you're like, I think my new supplements are starting to make me stink. Or something. It was something along those lines, but you were smelling yourself and you're like, God, man, I reek, like I stink for some reason. And I can't remember when you figured it out, but the whole time it was Dave with just a tad of doe urine. On your
It was down at like it was down at like the Chili or the Applebee's. Remember we were all sitting around the round table?
Oh yeah. That's
the
right.
Look on Luke's face. I forget what it was. He was, because like Josh said, Luke was the bully, right? So this is back when he was all jacked up and everything, and all roided out or whatever. And
Luke looked like the ultimate warrior.
And he was like going to town on Big Dave, man. And then all of a sudden he just let loose. And I forget how he said it, but he's like, "Hey, brother, yeah, that funk you got, you got going on over like the last year or so, or whatever." And then that's when he broke the deer piss. And you could see the look on Luke's face were instant, right? Like he's like, "That MFer, dude." I almost pissed myself.
Good. He got me good. And the best part about a prank like that is when you can keep it going and not say anything, and you really get inside. Because he got in my head. I had no idea he was there, but it's like something stinks, man. What's going on? And I was trying new soaps and all this stuff, and I was like, it's crazy how I don't smell bad on the weekends, but I smell bad at work. Dave totally got me, man. He's such a good dude, man. When he flipped his he flipped a vehicle at an unimproved surfaces course there that we all went through up in, I think it was West Virginia. And yeah. And he flipped a vehicle, and it's like when we found out about that, I think Dave hadn't even stopped bleeding before somebody called back to the unit and was like, "Dude, y'all never guess what happened. Dave's sitting here bleeding. He flipped a vehicle." So it was so classic that I think our friend Justin, who might occasionally listen to the podcast, he actually saw what happened and threw up. I think he threw up. He saw Dave's cut on his arm, and so we made a diorama out of that. A few of us got together, bought some G.I. Joe figures, a G.I. Joe Jeep, and we got a little Build-A-Bear thing. And Dave wasn't so bad that his arm was all messed up. He needed stitches. It was really bad. He was mad because his Arc'teryx jacket got torn. And that was back when Arc'teryx was like super expensive.
His brand new jacket.
It's still expensive.
Yeah, and he was calling up Arc'teryx. Hey, brother! Don't y'all have a guarantee on this thing? So we bought a little Build-A-Bear recorder, and we made a little recording in our best Dave imitation. And hey, brother! Hey, I just rolled a Jeep, man. My Arc'teryx is smoking dog turd, so I'm just wondering if I can get a new one, brother. Oh, it was great, man. Dave's such a good dude, man, and Josh is right. He's a teddy bear, but I'm gonna fight back on the bully part. It's a wolf pack, bro. It's a wolf pack. Dave was a big teddy bear, but exhibit the slightest sign of weakness, and bro, the wolves are gonna be all over you.
That's true. It was truly a hallway full of sharks. Like the slightest misstep, and I mean you were done. You were finished, and all you could pray for is that somebody else would f up bigger, really fast, right? So the attention would be taken off of you.
Yeah.
It definitely was, but that's one of the things that made it great, and that's one of the things that kept us on our toes and performing at a high level, as much as we could. I mean, because at the end of the day, only the mediocre are always at their best. But but yeah, no, man, it was good. But yeah, those were some good pranks. I remember when we wrapped his car in cellophane. It was during maintenance week, and I forget who was giving the class, but everybody sitting in the conference room, and like the last slide was a picture of all of us standing around his car, and it took it a minute. He was like, "Oh, somebody's car." For the buckor. It took him like 30 minutes just to get into his car because he had to basically unsaran wrap it. Yeah, that was good, man. Yeah, he's a good dude, man. I still talk to him every couple of days. We swap messages and stuff, and yeah, I can definitely consider him a friend. And
we always talk like we're big men and high T, hard chargers, the best, all this stuff, wolf pack, swimming in a pool of sharks. But at the end of the day, I think that anybody will tell you that a lot of us, maybe not you guys, but like me, Dave, won't mention many other names, we're just like little girls, man. We do drama. It's like, man, Dave said this to me, man. Screw that guy. You don't talk to him for like 2 years, and then you forget why. It's just we're kind of little girls like that sometimes, And I can't remember what Dave said that pissed me off like 2 years ago, but he said something, and I've been out of touch with him. But at the same time, I feel like that, if he and I were in the same room, dude, it'd be like, we didn't miss a beat. It's weird like that.
Yeah. No, it was definitely, at the same time, it's like WrestleMania with all the testosterone, in there. But it's like WrestleMania meets season 3 of Glee. It's ridiculous. It was absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, it was definitely a lot of that nonsense. So, people were sitting here BSing, and everybody's like, I wonder what they're going to talk about today. I wonder what they're going to talk about this time. There's really not a whole lot going on in the news. I mean, I took a look, and I mean, there's just not a whole lot.
Slow news cycle.
It is. I don't even know, dude. I don't even think there's been. I think the last major thing that happened was the Supreme Court. Dobbs v. Mississippi. I think that was like the last big thing in the news that dropped. So I'll throw it over to Luke because he looks like he's about to say something, and then he's like, "Oh, now you threw me off." Now you can chime. I'll throw it over to Luke and see what he wants to kick us off with. I think he should start by talking about his new hat for you YouTube viewers out there, and letting us know the story behind Chaka.
Oh man, when I saw this hat, for those of you on YouTube, I just came across Facebook because Facebook knows what I want more than I know what I want. So this came across. I'm like, is that Chaka from Land of the Lost? I was like, that hat is rocking, bro. And I took a picture of it, sent it to Josh. It's called Angry Minnow Apparel or something like that. So it started off as a fishing thing, and they've just got some of the funniest hats. And this one, Chaka, it's called the Little Buddy hat. They call it Chaka their little buddy. And Land of the Lost always takes me back. They have a Slee Stack hat. Um, they have a Chupacabra hat. And I think Josh ordered the Chupacabra, but they ended up sending him the Chaka hat. And when he got it, I was like, "You're copycat." Oh, but yeah. So Angry Minnow. Yeah, I think this has pretty cool. The Chaka hat. I like it, things to mix it up a little bit. What I was going to say though is, yeah, we don't get a penny from Angry Minnow, by the way. So whatever, screw them. Nice hats, but screw them.
We don't get a penny from anybody.
Yeah, we don't. So what I was going to say is maybe Josh and I just don't have good news feeds. Roger, Moneybags pays for all these high tech news services and all that stuff. So maybe he's seen some news we could talk about. Roger, you got anything?
Whatever, man. You're the one who broke the story on the Uvalde, Texas. Obviously, we're all tracking that, what's going on this week, and it's. I do want to throw it back to Luke because I think he had. Well, one, I mean, you broke the news, and I guess I can say this. I mean, you broke the news to us probably 30, 45 minutes before it even hit Fox News or anything. And so as he texted it out, and at first I didn't even recognize it. I'm like, did he, typo that thing or autocorrect or whatever? And I start gurgling some stuff. You can't find anything, and then he's like, "Hey, man, guys, this stuff is getting bad." And talking about the SWAT team and aerial assets and this and that. And then finally, it wasn't until 30, 45 minutes for it was like breaking news on Fox News, and then of course now it's I actually had to take a break from Twitter for the last couple of days because with all the anti-2A, assault ban, this and that. I mean, that's the only thing that's on there. It's just inundated with that, junk and crap. And I think that, that's one of the downfalls, I think, to Twitter, a little bit off topic, but it's one of the downfalls is it's just a bunch of junk, man. There are no conversations on there. There's no reasoning with anybody. There's no exchange of ideas or this and that. It's just a bunch of junk. And, I guess we'll get into it in a little bit down the road. But Luke, give us a rundown of exactly, well, we can't even say that right now. With the latest info that you have and what we've seen on TV, give us a rundown of what happened and kind of where they're at right now.
Oh, well, I don't know if I'm prepared to give a rundown for various reasons. But the background of that is I have some friends down in that area, and they started blasting me with texts about this stuff. So I bounced it off you guys and was like, "Have you guys heard anything?" Because a lot of times when stuff like this starts happening, you're like, "Well, is it really happening?" And it was strange to me. Yeah, it did take a long time, and I want to say I could be wrong, but I want to say it was more than 45 to an hour before it hit the news. But my friends, telling me what was going on down there were with a lot of stuff. They were on the ball, but again, there were a lot of rumors and misunderstandings going on as well during the situation. So that's one of the reasons I don't want to like go down the timeline, but because there's a lot of stuff still up in the air. I think there's a lot of misleading, I don't want to say facts, but there's a lot of misleading stuff going on as far as the parents were trying to charge in. There's no doubt that the police did not go in when they probably should have. There's no doubt about that. But I just think that there's just a lot of stuff that still needs to shake out with this thing as far as the actual timeline of exactly when did he enter the school, exactly who did somebody shoot at him going in, because some of the reports I was hearing, they just seemed inaccurate at the time and they were dismissed as inaccurate. But now as the story unfolds, it's becoming more and more accurate. And some of the other things that were spot on that I was getting as things were unfolding that were accepted as the God's honest truth, now it's coming to light that those are not true. I don't know. It's a bad situation for sure. I want to kick it to Josh. I think we're going to talk probably quite a bit on this. There's a lot of stuff going on, like Roger said, a lot of conversations that it's making me scratch my head as to why we're talking about certain things and not others. I have my own theories on why we're talking about certain things and not others. But Josh, do you want to start off with the questions you have about the police, or do you want to start off with the questions you have about this kid? so on and so forth. I mean, I think there's a lot to unpack with this particular story. And if you want to go over what you know the timeline in your mind, or dude, I'm just gonna kick it to you, and we'll just kind of go around the horn on this a few times, I guess.
Yeah, thanks. So there, you're absolutely right. There's so much to unpack on this, um, and not just about this kid, but about mass shootings in general. Like yeah, I mean, I have a lot to say on that later. But for this specific incident, I know kind of we went back and forth a little bit, on talking about the police who sat outside for 40 minutes and then go in. I don't want to talk. I mean, we can talk specifically about that if we want, but so I have pulled up. So this is the timeline as reported by Texas Department of Public Safety. So I'll caveat this with DPS is probably still gathering information on exactly what happened, because the three of us know, and a lot of our listeners know, in these types of situations, these types of incidents, initial reports are almost always wrong. They are always wrong. Outside of an initial report saying, "Hey, people are being shot," every other detail you can put probably zero stock in it, because it's going to be wrong. It's that whole adage of three people witness a murder. They witness something happen, and you interview them immediately afterwards, and you get three completely different stories. And so, at the end of the day, Texas DPS, they are still going through that right now and trying to, piece together all of these different stories. It's obviously an emotionally charged situation. So, once those emotions come down a little bit, then people can, get the facts. But as it stands right now, I'll say as it stands of yesterday afternoon at about 4 o'clock, this is Texas DPS's timeline. All right, so at 11 a.m., the shooter, he sent messages, posted messages on social media, that he was gonna kill his grandmother, and shortly after that, he followed through on uh, on that statement. At 11:28, approximately, and these are approximate times. They're caveating these as approximate times, so I'll caveat these as approximate times. So he drove the approximately 2 miles to Robb Elementary in his grandmother's truck. He crashed the vehicle outside. He had a bag, what they're describing as a bag of ammunition, and a rifle, which we now know was a Daniel Defense, AR-15 platform. And those of us who have actually purchased weapons before and are somewhat familiar with Daniel Defense, they are not giving those things away. Daniel Defense, you're paying 1,800 plus for a Daniel Defense a platform, because they are very, very expensive. They're very quality, but they're very expensive. So he gets out of his truck after he crashes his grandmother's truck. After he crashes it, he sees two people outside a funeral home across the street from the school. He fires at them. He fires a couple rounds at them. They run off, and then he apparently um, enters the school through a door that was propped open by a school employee. They don't, obviously the school employee is not named. So that happened at 11:28. At 11:30, police received their first 911 call about a vehicle crash and shots fired. At 11:31, a Uvalde school resource officer who was off campus, he heard the gunshots, and then he reports he is on his way to that school. A lot of people are so a lot of people are giving grief to the Uvalde school resource officer for not being at that school. Just a quick background: I don't know if this is the case in Uvalde, but I know here, where I live, like there's not an SRO at each school. Right, you have one SRO that's responsible for a couple of schools, so they're back and forth between the schools. That may be the case in Uvalde, that may not be. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's if I heard correctly on the news, I want to say it was like 3 school resource officers for the entire school district. So yeah,
Yeah,
they just rotate, through the various schools.
yeah. Um, and so at 11:32, the gunman hops a fence and he starts shooting at the school. Again, this is DPS's timeline. 11:33, The shooter enters a classroom. And then at 11:44, the Uvalde Police Department are inside making entry. They made entry into the school, right? And I think this is where a lot of the conflicting reports were, is that they never went into the school. They were outside. They were in the school at 11:44, but they were not in the classroom where the gunman where the gunman was. All right. So at 11:44, they make entry into the school. They take rounds. They're being shot at by the shooter who's inside a classroom, and that's when they retrograde back outside. At 11:51, three Uvalde Police Department officers, were gathered outside the classroom. Again, they're inside the school, but they're outside the classroom where the shooter is. The door is locked. At 12:03. 19 officers, approximately 19 officers. And so now we're talking Uvalde Police Department, and Luke, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's Zavala County. Okay. Yeah. So Zavala County deputies and others. And again, Luke, correct me if I'm wrong, but so Uvalde is just west of San Antonio. That's a major hub for illegal immigrant trafficking, drug trafficking. So there's always Border Patrol presence, there's U.S. Marshal presence, there's always there's a significant amount of federal level law enforcement presence in that geographic area, not necessarily in Uvalde itself, but in that area. So at 12:10, at 12:03, Bortac, federal officers, they just say federal officers and Bortac. I don't know who else, what other organizations are represented there. It's just they say federal law enforcement, but they do specify BORTAC, which is Border Patrol Tactical Team. Correct, Luke? Just to be sure. Yeah, correct me on this stuff as far as that goes. If I'm wrong, because you're more educated on it than I am. So at 12:10, a teacher calls 911 and reports that children are being shot. At 12:15, the Border Patrol Special Tactical Team arrived. And so everybody's kind of probably seen it by now. If you've remotely following this, the one Bortac guy shows up. He's got his dad, his dad's shirt, the short sleeve button up plaid shirt on with his dad jeans, and his baseball cap, and he's ready to get to work. At 12:17, Uvalde Sheriff Department, they announced it on Twitter. That's when they officially announced it on Twitter. At 12:18, teacher calls 911 and says that 9 students are still alive in the classroom. At 12:21, they're still connected on the phone to that 911 call. At 12:21, they hear 3 gunshots. At 12:36, another student called 911 and said that they were alive. And they were told to, stay on the phone, be quiet, don't say anything. At 12:43, a student called the police and asked officers to please come in and help them. At 12:50, that is when the Border Patrol team, and I don't know if this is correct or not, but what I heard was there was the Bortac agent who showed up and one other who breached the door at 12:50 and killed the shooter. So that's the timeline right now, as of yesterday. This reported by Texas DPS. I'm sure that will change as we continue to get facts and details and everything. But I think that's a good place to start. At least that's what we're being told, right? And so I will say, I think Texas DPS was caught flat-footed on this as far as being able to message and get in front of things. The videos that came out, of parents who appeared to, be held back from going in to getting their kids. The one lady who was handcuffed, who reported allegedly, again, I wasn't there, so I don't, so I won't speak to that. But she, she broke free and she, crossed the fence. She jumped the fence and she went, in there and got her kid. A buddy of mine who's Mexican, he was like, man, he's like, you don't mess with a Mexican mama, like, she'll scuff you up, when it comes to her kids. But So I can't speak to, I can't speak to any of that. I do know the messaging, like it piled up and it piled up on social media. And Texas DPS, man, I think they were caught flat-footed on getting in front of that, and getting out. Hey, here's what we know. Here's what we don't know. We understand the concerns, and these are the answers we're working to try and get to, to fill in these gaps. So with that, I have a lot to say, not necessarily about this shooter, but and Roger's correct. Before I kick it over to him, Roger's correct in that social media right now is ablaze with emotion. That's all it is. It's simply emotion. People are screaming at the government to do something. That's it. They're saying do something. The last thing you ever want to do is, one, make decisions when you're emotional, and two, the last thing you ever want to do is tell the government to do something, right? Because the government sucks at everything other than spending your money and pointing a gun at people. That's the only two things they're good at. They suck at everything else. And so, the social media is absolutely full of emotion right now. There's not, there's very little calmness and level headedness on there. But I'll kick it over to Roger, and I'll say, Roger, where do we go from here? What can what is Texas DPS? What can they do now to kind of restore restore the confidence, in local law enforcement? Because what I've seen right now, man, man, you know, it's fairly low. The last couple of days, and again, it's a lot of emotion. It's a lot of this and that people are playing off of, and driving home. But we have not done police officers any favors over the last couple of years, as a society, and that that confidence level is getting crushed right now. And I guess kind of what are your thoughts on it, and then where do we go from here?
So I think with this whole thing, there's several points of failure across the board, and I think you're spot on with Texas DPS just being caught flat-footed. I think the incident commander has now come out and said at that time they didn't think that it was still an active shooter incident. They thought it was just somebody who was barricaded in there. That's why they didn't go in. From what I've gathered on social media, and I don't know how true this is or not, because again, we weren't there, but just seeing like some of the tweets and things that come out that when that when that border patrol agent went in, much like you said on the timeline, and again, I don't know how much of this is just rhetoric or people trying to play him out to be a hero, which he is, saving what he could. But apparently that last phone call with the student, like, hey, please come in and help us. From what I've seen on the news, he was like, you know what, F this, F the incident commander, like, I'm doing something about this. I got to go in and do something about this. And so he kind of went in there, him and the other guy, and they took care of business. But it was a teacher who propped the door open. The teacher propped the door open to go get her cell phone and then left the door propped open. So, and I don't know what type of, I don't know what type of resources the school has. I don't know what kind of, policies they have with that. I've seen with my kids that with their schools out here in Arizona, it's normally one way in, one way out. You have to be buzzed in. You come through a front office, are there workarounds? Absolutely. Right. If it's lunchtime, this and that, you're going to find a side gate that's open and whatever. But, those are the type of things that, hey, they put them in place for a reason, and everybody has to implement those policies. Right. But going back to even before then, and like you said, everybody's emotionally charged. What pisses me off is there are those that are going to politicize this, Democrats and Republicans. And it's like, hey, something has to be done on a broader level, and also very different facets, right? That there needs to be solutions for. But you're going to see so much politicizing from the left and right, and it's going to detract from what actually has to happen to stop this stuff in the future. When you look at this kid, the number one thing, and I tweeted out before, I think, or maybe we were texting, I was like, hey, how long before we find out this kid was looked at a year ago by law enforcement? Because it seems like every single shooting that happens, he was interviewed, somebody brought something up, a year prior, and yeah, he's a threat, there's an issue, and nothing was done, and the kid goes up and shoots something up. With this kid here, he gets on Facebook, and I don't know how many followers he has in this, and I have no idea. I just have to imagine that, so from the time that he posted to when he shot his grandmother, which from what I understand, the grandmother's alive and in a stable condition. So That was 30 minutes. Like he posts on there, I'm going to go shoot her in the face or whatever he says. And then he comes back and posts, yep, I just shot her. I'm going to go shoot an elementary school. That point right there, like somebody saw that, right? You'll never convince me that somebody didn't see, that. And that goes back to what we were talking about initially with this stuff is like, hey, man, I mean, we have to police ourselves. Somebody saw those posts. And that's the point when they should have acted. The other piece of this is this kid obviously wasn't mentally stable. There's questions on, how did he get the Daniel Defense rifles? When you look at the upbringing, living with the grandma and the granddad, and I think the grandfather was he was wasn't he in prison or he was a felon or something like that? And again, there's a lot of things that get wrapped up into this. Where, hey, man, when you look at what the lockdowns have done over the last year, and Luke and Josh have preached this stuff to they're blue in the face, but we are going to find that this has done more to hurt our mental health, these lockdowns over the last year or 2 years than anything we'll ever see. Now, would this kid still have done this, that, and whatever? Who knows? We'll never know the answer to that. But, at the very beginning, just with his overall mental health and mental wellness, and then you look at the social media posts, and then he shows up on the scene and just kind of, Josh went through a very detailed timeline, but dude, shots were fired. I mean, it was like 80 minutes before they actually go in and do anything. And then you look at all the cops, the law enforcement officers, the FBI, everybody's there. But like Josh mentioned, hey, you spent the last 2 years shitting on these guys and gals. So, one, I can tell you that it's hard, what we're seeing out here in Arizona and probably across the country, it's hard to get, I don't want to say more qualified or high quality, but higher quality law enforcement officers because nobody wants to be a police officer anymore. Right? Because your local populace is crapping on it. You've got the president sitting up there. You've got the vice president. You've got members of Congress basically saying, hey, you're all turds and we need to defund you. Who wants to be a police officer? Right? And I'm not trying to take the blame away from them, but what it does is it takes some of the quality away from who you're hiring. And then I would bet, that when you look at what's happened with the other school shootings, especially like with Parkland, where they found that the police really don't have any, I forget what the court ruling was, right? They were being sued or whatever and said, hey, they really have no responsibility to go in and protect anybody.
The police, they determined the police have no legal obligation to protect you.
Right. And I think that was an actual legal ruling. And
yes,
so then
that was an actual court ruling.
You have to imagine that they, and I don't know how many, law enforcement officers were out there. Luke probably knows more about that than we do, but you got to think that's got to cross their minds. I mean, 2 or 3 of them, and it's what's heartbreaking about this. And I don't know, maybe it's just where we're from. And especially those of our folks that have military background and this and that, I can actually see the CBP guy, getting fed up. Like, I'm done. You had parents going in, from what we can tell, shots were being fired, pretty consistently. And like, what, you're just supposed to sit there? I mean, dude, it's crazy. And it's, I don't even know what I'll be interested. I'll throw this over to Luke. It'll be interesting to hear like why the delay. Like I don't understand any of that stuff. It's like, especially you're in an elementary school, right? There are kids there. You hear these consistent shots being fired. It's like, why the delay? I get you're waiting for backup and this and that, but from what it seems like, I mean, there was at least 30, 40, 50 minutes where everybody's just kind of hanging around. And I think from the time the CBP agent showed up till he went in, it was less than 30 minutes. So I'm assuming he gets up there, he's finding out what's going on, yada, yada, like everybody else. You get the 911 call. And then again, my assumption, he's like, yeah, F this, I'm going in. And so he goes in with his buddy. And I think what I saw and I think it was Fox News, they actually started bringing up some of the chain of command stuff. And it was kind of an interesting point. I think it kind of goes to back up what the, Border Patrol agent did. And now you've got the, the incident commander saying, yeah, I made a bad call. I made a wrong decision. Like, I don't even know what goes through your mind. But I tell you, when it goes back to all the stuff with George Floyd and all this stuff, it has changed the mindset of law enforcement officers and how they operate. At least that's my broader take on it. So I'll throw it to Luke. I know he's chomping at the bit over there. He's on mute. Like, I can't tell if he's yelling at me, disagreeing, or agreeing, or what he's doing. But we'll get some of his thoughts on this thing.
I was yelling that you're taking all my talking points, bro. Kick it over to me. You're taking all my talking points.
That's what I do. That's how I roll.
I actually had George Floyd written down here. it's funny. He's posted on social media and stuff like that, and for how long before it actually happened. And Josh will post a mean comment to somebody and get banned in a matter of minutes. So I mean, there's a lot of things that aren't being asked right now. There's a lot of entities, if you will, institutional entities that are more than happy to talk about things like police response time, so on and so forth, instead of systemic and institutional failure. One thing to note is the door to that classroom was pretty hefty, and it opened out, not in. So it wasn't possible to kick that door, number one, or even with the battering ram they use, it would have been very difficult to get in there. That's not an excuse. I'm just saying that's something to keep in mind. There's a lot of stuff to keep in mind during this in this situation, and I'm not gonna shit on the cops. But I'm also, I work with police officers every day, and a lot of them are saying the exact same thing. It was a failure. Roger, you touched on this. It was a failure in the SOP. In an incident like that, there's supposed to be a standard operating procedure, right? But you had a bunch of different entities converging all at once on that school, and it's like too many chiefs, not enough Indians, or no chiefs at all Indians, not knowing who's making the call here. And what I don't like, even though it may be true, I don't like DPS throwing the ISD police chief under the bus so hard like they have. I mean, basically, in a press conference I saw yesterday, the head of DPS just completely threw that police chief under the bus, and I'm like, dude, is that really what you want to do? Is that going to solve the problem? Because it's not. You get a new police chief in there, that wouldn't have made any difference at all, I don't think. I think this was just a perfect storm of a horrible situation, a bunch of different entities all closing in at the same time. Josh was, you mentioned it's close to the border. You got a lot of activity in that area. You had a BORTAC dude there, man. Side note, make no mistake, man, BORTAC, those guys are no joke. Those guys are the operators of federal law enforcement. They're right up there with FBI, HRT. I mean, these guys are no joke. They're all retired, or they're all former SEALs, Rangers, and a few operators in there. I mean, these guys do not mess around. It didn't surprise me at all that BORTAC guy was the one who took down the shooter. Got up out of his barber chair and grabbed a shotgun or something. That was freaking crazy, man. I mean, so good on him. But for me, I am more interested. I don't know if this is me as a person or I'm just fed up with this kind of stuff. But it's for me, it's not the how, it's the why in all of this stuff. Why did he shoot up the school? It's like Roger said, we'll never know. We'll never know exactly what happened, and Roger's right. But my question is, why not? I mean, why can we not do an in-depth study, a deep dive into the failures that led to him walking or running into that school, shooting at the school, and so on and so forth? We've touched on it. Horrible home life. Shot his grandmother. He was locked down, didn't graduate high school. Who knows? Maybe if the lockdown didn't happen, he wouldn't have graduated anyway. We don't know. But again, why can't we do an in-depth study on this? Why isn't anybody looking at how or why exactly did this happen? The how of the police response. This is what this incident is going to be remembered for, is the slow police response. And as that should be an element of what we remember and what we should try to fix and get that SOP really nailed down. I guarantee in Uvalde, there's going to be some changes of personnel up in there. Tell you what, a lot of people being thrown under the bus, and they will get that SOP. But what I'm afraid of is that it'll go the other way, and they'll charge in when they don't need to. Who knows, right? As far as the response goes, it took too long. We all agree on that. It took way too long for whatever reason. But there's a lot of different elements that law enforcement are facing when they go into a situation like that. You think back to the first one that I remember in my life that really struck a chord was Columbine. I mean, what's going through LE's mind, law enforcement's mind, is: are there bombs? Are there multiple shooters? Where is everybody? What, there's just a ton of questions when you converge on a scene like that. That's no excuse for inaction. Okay. But when I see parents, trashing the cops, I want to know exactly where in the timeline were those clips of parents saying, "You're cowards, we should go in." Exactly when was that? Because if it was before the scene was secured, what, are you going to just let them run in? They're going to get shot too. It's like, let's take a holistic view of this rather than, as Roger pointed out, and Josh, instead of straight emotion. Let's take a step back and ask, okay, are the cops completely just jerk offs and not, letting anybody go in, or are they actually trying to protect the people who they know aren't shot and know aren't in the school? Okay. I mean, let's back up and take a look at that. That's why I'm big on, let's kind of wait and see what happens. Let's wait and see before I make a snap judgment. And you know what? Maybe those police were out of line. I don't know, but I sure as hell wouldn't let a parent go into an active crime scene. Are you crazy? An unarmed parent going into an active crime scene. I know that's what we would all want to do for sure. That's a reasonable emotion to have, but it ain't going to happen. Not on my watch. With Roger, what you said, you kind of took a little bit of the wind out of my sails there with the hashtag defund the police, hashtag George Floyd, hashtag Michael Brown and Ferguson. I think that this is part of it, part of the systemic failure of police second guessing, not having the immediate will to act. I think that's part of it. I definitely do. And what I'd like to talk about, I know Josh is going to have some more things to say on this, but let's be honest and realize that this will happen again over and over. It will. I mean, to say that it's not is foolish. I'm not talking about just a school. It could be a school. It could be another grocery store. It could be another concert in Las Vegas. So, trying to keep emotion out of it, Josh. If you can address, how do we tackle this? How do we get to the root causes of the institutional and systemic failures that have brought stuff like this to our doorsteps?
I it's going to be it's obviously going to be tough because right now, as you guys pointed out, everybody wants to politicize it. It's immediately politicized, and and I'll go back to the George Floyd thing. The vast majority of people that I talk to and that I know, and that I have within my circle, looked at that and was like, that was wrong, right? George Floyd's a criminal. At the end of the day, George Floyd's a criminal. He doesn't deserve any sympathy, but George Floyd should still be alive, right? Like, there's zero reason to kneel on somebody's neck for 9 minutes, especially when the dude's already cuffed up. I just, and so we had that moment to actually have a discussion as a nation. Okay, is this acceptable? Not acceptable? What are we willing to accept? But it was immediately politicized. And, then we all know what happened afterwards. Half the country burned in mostly peaceful protests. And we lost that opportunity to have that conversation. It's the same thing now. And, and that's a great point, Luke, when you talk about the different agencies converging on a scene, who's in charge, whose SOP are we using, who's this, who's that. I was talking to a buddy of mine who's a police officer in Colorado Springs, and, and their SOP, and, you brought up Columbine. Colorado police officers learned a lot of stuff after Columbine. Is their SOP now is when there's an active shooter, it doesn't matter if you're the first cop on scene and you are by yourself, you are taking your shotgun or a rifle, whatever is in your cruiser, and you are going in. You are bypassing victims. You are going to the shooter and you are stopping the killing. Right? That is their SOP. You go to the shooter, and so some police departments have figured that out, and some police departments are probably going to have that in their SOP here, very, very soon. But you're absolutely right. We're not talking about the root cause. And here's what I think is a root cause. And I'm going to hog up a couple minutes. I got a little bit of a rant here. When we start talking about this, and I kind of, vented a little bit the other day on social media. The root cause is not the how, as you say, right? The root cause is not AR-15s, it's not video games, it's not, it is not, the airsoft, kind of culture. The root cause started back in the 60s with the counterculture movement and the war on poverty. All right, that is the root cause of this. Now, as the definition is, mass shootings, was it 3 or 4 more, casual, people shot in one single incident? Yeah, there's incidents you can find all the way back to, the beginning of damn near, the invention of the firearm, back when the Chinese invented gunpowder. But they really did not start taking off in the United States until the 90s, right? But you go back, you take a look at it. The war on poverty started in 1964 with Lyndon Baines Johnson. Almost every single problem that we face today as a country can be traced back to the incentivized destruction of the nuclear family. Almost every single issue that we have today goes back to the nuclear family and the incentivized destruction. You go back, look at 1964, 7% of kids born to single mothers. All right. 7%. In 2013, it was 41%. 41% of kids are born to single mothers. That's since 2013. Okay. When the war on poverty began in 1964, 30% of families below the poverty line were single parents. As of 2014, 68%. 68%. 1 in 4 kids live without a father figure in the home. All right. That's not to say all fathers are awesome, right? We all know people out there who had shit fathers as kids, and we all know that there are people out there who, men out there who are not fathers, and some of those kids are, better off without those douche canoes. But statistically speaking, right, we're talking about statistics here. Kids with 2 parents homes tend to do better in life than not. Again, that's not an absolute, right? There are great Americans out there who came up, being raised by single mothers, being raised by, single dads, but again, we're talking statistics here. And you turn around and you layer on a study by the U.S. Secret Service on mass shooters, 91% of them had significant life stressors, with 58% of those specifically being family stressors, whether it was single parent homes, divorce, substance abuse, domestic violence, parents who are in jail, those local parentis, for kids who are raised by their grandparents or an aunt or uncle, them being in jail. And, a case in point is this shooter lived with his grandparents. His grandfather was a felon. He wasn't even supposed to have, he wasn't even allowed to have guns in that house because his grandfather was a felon. Now, that's only part of the why, in my opinion. And, I'm rattling off some, percentages, and these are facts. These are facts that are pulled for a number of resources, whether it be the CDC, whether it be, the census, the American Medical Journal of Medicine, stuff. But, this is why I think this is. The next part of the why that, and we've talked about it before, is medication. The over medication of Americans in general, but especially kids, right? When I don't know about you guys, but when I was a kid, I could not sit still. But it would probably cause me physical pain to sit still. I remember, in school, my teachers would tell my mom, they'd be like, Josh he won't sit still. He's not paying attention. He just wants to go outside, and play on the playground. And, it's like, oh, well, of course, I'm an 8-year-old boy. I don't want to learn math right now. I like to go outside and play on the monkey bars and, and eat dirt. Right. Because that's what 8-year-old boys do. You know what my parents did? My parents didn't shove Ritalin or Adderall in me. My mom said, you better sit still and pay attention in class or I'm going to spank your ass after the teacher spanks your ass. Right. Which she gave her permission, because my parents were always like, hey, you got a problem with him? You spank his ass. And then when he gets home, he's going to get his ass spanked again. Right. And so it wasn't like, well, let's medicate him. Right. Oh, he may have ADD. He may have, ADHD and, where you shove Ritalin down his gullet like Mike and Ike's. Right. you go back and look, according to the Pharmaceutical Journal, this prescribing of antidepressants, and whether it's whether it's Ritalin, or you talk about antidepressants, I mean, you're talking Prozac, Xanax, Zoloft, those things increase. And these are ages, children age 5 to 12 years old, has increased by more than 40% between 2015 and 2021. 40% increase in that short amount of time. 5 to 12-year-olds. Could you imagine shoving Xanax down your 5-year-old? Right? Because your 5-year-old, doesn't want to pay attention, or they're, well, I'm a little sad right now. Well, here, little Johnny, let me just shove some Xanax down you, right? And the majority of those kids in that 40% increase are males, right? So keep that in mind. Everybody remember on Wolf of Wall Street? You guys seen Wolf of Wall Street? Remember the Quaaludes? Like they were always there was always on the search for the Quaaludes, right? The Quaaludes, they've got those things got banned like in the 80s. It didn't take very long. The feds were like, "Hey man, Quaaludes are not like these. We can't have this because it's straight making people batshit crazy." But 1987, guess what happened? Prozac hit the market. The year before that, 1986, Valium hit the market. And something else happened. We're the only country in the world that allows it. Commercials for drugs.
New Zealand does too. New Zealand does too. All right. Straight to consumer ads for drugs. Right? So you got all these commercials. Hey, you want to be happy all the time? The economy got you down. There's we got the recession in the 80s a little bit, before the economy took off. The Cold War is going on. People were worried about, nuclear war. Hey, you want to be happy all the time? Just take this pill, man. Just take this pill. It'll make you happy. Do you get up in the morning and go to bed at night? You need this pill. Do you drink water and breathe air? You need this pill. It'll make you happy, right? In 2010, 11% of Americans over the age of 12 were on a prescription for antidepressants. 11% of Americans in 2010 were over the age of 12, right? We're not talking about 18 and above. We're not talking about adults. We're not talking about elder. Over the age of 12, we're on an antidepressant. Kids, right? People are going into their doctors and they are demanding this drug. They are not, it's not their doctor saying, "Hey, I think this would be, helpful for you." It's people going in because they got their ads on their TV, going in demanding, "I want this. This is what I want." Right? So in 2010, it was the third most prescribed medication, and it was only topped by your steroidal anti-inflammatories. I call it, what do they call them? The NSAIDs or whatever. It's your ibuprofens, right? Between 1988 and 2008, 400% increase in antidepressant use. 400% increase in antidepressant use. And the most common ones, and all this is important for what I'm going to say here in a few minutes, right? So you got Prozac, Celexa, Lexapro, Zoloft, Paxil, Pexiva, Trazodone, and Verberd. And I know I probably said that wrong because I'm a product of Florida Public Schools. So whatever. All right. So we're talking, what do they do? What do these antidepressants do? They increase the serotonin in your brain. For those out there who may not know, like serotonin, that's your feel good, chemical that gets released, in your brain housing group. It's antidepressants are SSRIs. They're selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. You start taking these and you get that feeling of not caring about anything. There has been an established relationship between SSRI use and psychosis and hallucinations, and stuff. So we started handing these things out. People are taking them, man. It's like Tic Tacs. People are feeling good. Kids are taking them. They've been soaking their brains in them for years and years and years. And, eventually they started looking at it and they were like, "Man, I think these things are causing some problems. People are getting a little aggressive, and there's some violence that's happening and we don't know why."
So the FDA would not come out and say one way or the other, yes, this is, correlation equals causation. But what they did was in the FDA database, 484 drugs are identified as triggers to serious adverse events significant enough to warrant a case study, right, through 2004 to 2009. Of these 484 medications, 31 were identified to have a, quote, disproportionate association with violence. These 31 drugs, I'm still quoting, these 31 drugs make up 78% of all cases of violence toward others in the FDA's database and included multiple psychotropic medications, 11 different types of antidepressants, six hypnotic and sedatives, 3 ADHD medications, and then one smoking cessation drug. It was the whatever the one of the ones that comes through the patch, or something with making people a small percentage of people kind of wig out. Again, correlation doesn't equal causation, but at this point, people should ask some questions. Okay, it was bad enough that the FDA eventually had to put a warning on every single antidepressant in the United States. That warning is, quote, anxiety, agitation, panic attacks, insomnia, irritability, hostility, aggressiveness, impulsivity. I can't pronounce that word because I'm dumb. Hypomania and mania have been reported in adult and pediatric patients being treated with antidepressants for major depressive disorder, as well for indications both psychiatric and non-psychiatric. All right. So I said a lot of words there, and people are like, okay, so what does this have to do with mass shootings? Well, let's run down a real quick list, and I'll tell you why. 37 of the most prolific mass shooters in recent history, since kind of we've been around, had an active prescription for an antidepressant at the time they committed their crime. All right. So in 1989, Patrick Purdy in Stockton, California, he was on amitriptyline. Again, I'm saying that wrong because I'm dumb. But that was the one, that was the case that was cited to initiate the assault weapons ban that came later during the Clinton administration. 1999, Eric Harris, Columbine. He was one of the Columbine shooters. Prozac and Luvox. 2005, Jeff Weiss up in Red Lake, Minnesota. He was on Prozac. He was on 60 milligrams per day, which is triple the average recommended dose for adults. Triple the dose. Virginia Tech in 2007, Ting Ho Tree, he was on Prozac and Paxil. 2007, Robert Hawkins, Prozac. He had been on Prozac since he was 6 years old. He committed the crime. He committed the shooting when he was 19. From 6 years old to 19 years old, that kid had been soaking in Prozac. 2008, Illinois University. The shooter was on Prozac, Xanax, and Ambien. And we all know, dude, all three of us have taken Ambien before, right? You got that long flight over the pond. You're like, I'm going to take some Ambien, roll my sleeping bag out, on the bird and go to sleep. There's a reason they stopped handing that shit out, because it was like, this is making people crazy. People are doing things and they don't remember doing them. 2009, North Carolina nursing home, Lexapro, Xanax, Ambien, and Benadryl. Again, the shooter doesn't even remember this occurring, according to, 2012, everybody remembers the Colorado movie theater during, Batman. Kid was on Prozac. He later told the doctors the medication decreased his anxiety, but he also lost his fear of consequences. And as the dosage became higher, his thoughts became, and this is his words, became, quote, more obsessive and psychotic. Aaron Lewis, 2013, Washington Navy Yard. He was on Trazodone. 2014, Ivan Lopez at Fort Hood. The VA had him on SSRIs. The fucking kid, pardon my F-bomb there, in 2015, the Charleston Church. He was on antidepressants. 2016, Cascade Mall, Prozac. 2017, remember this one, the Texas Church, back in 2017. He was on an unspecified SSRI. A family member said, quote, he's been on psych meds since he was a toddler. Las Vegas, 2017, Valium. Parkland, the Parkland shooter, 2018. He was on antidepressants. They don't list a specific name, but the list goes on. And I guarantee you, with the Buffalo guy, and this clown, I guarantee you, at some point they're going to come back and they're going to say either this kid was on antidepressants or he exhibited all these other signs that all these other guys have displayed. But that still doesn't answer the full why, right? There's still another portion to the why. Why are people on antidepressants? Well, again, my theory is we stop raising resilient kids. A large portion of that, we stop raising resilient kids, and part of that is because of certain policies out there enacted by the left. And you can pick your movement of inclusive culture or this or that, but we stopped raising resilient kids. We removed every single bit of adversity in their early developmental upbringing, that spiraled them into a mental black hole. A 2014 survey by the American College Health Association found that 94% of counseling center directors reported a steady increase in the number of college students with severe psychological problems, and 89% reported an increase in the number of students arriving on campus who were already taking prescription medication for anxiety or depression. So, back to the antidepressants. But why? But why were they, showing up to their freshman year of college already medicated up? Because we shitty parents and democratic policies. We went from come home. I remember when I was a kid, it was you came home when it got dark, right? I would say when the street lights came on, but I lived on a dirt road. And we didn't have street lights because we were poor, and it just wasn't. But it was you came inside when it got dark. Now we have helicopter parents. Helicopter parents, you can't get them away. They're the kids who hover around them, in the playground. They won't let them play. They won't let them do dangerous things safely, which kids should be doing. We went from you had to earn an A, we want you to earn an A. You have to earn an A. Now we eliminate valedictorian because we don't want the kids who didn't get an A to feel bad. We stopped merit-based admissions across the country and a lot of things. We stopped spanking kids. I don't know about you guys, but I got spanked, and I never got a spanking I didn't deserve. I deserved every single one I got, and I think I turned out okay. I'm not completely crazy. We stopped keeping score, at little Johnny's soccer game. Why? Because we didn't want we didn't want the losers to feel bad that they lost. It's okay to lose. You should take that and, use that to make yourself better. We celebrated and encouraged nihilism. Now it's, life has no meaning. There is no God. We took God out of everything. Why? Because of the left's policies. We make kids' problems our problems. Instead of letting them figure it out and solve it on their own, we're doing everything for them. We're giving them participation trophies and birthday parties. The birthday party thing, like this was a new one to me, and it was years ago. But you guys know the birthday party. Like your kid goes to a birthday party and they come home with a goodie bag, and you're like, "Where'd you get that?" We're like, "Well, every kid gets one at this birthday party." I'm like, "What?" When our kids would have birthday parties, my wife's like, "Well, we got to make goodie bags for all the other kids." I'm like, "Why? It ain't their effing birthday." Guess what? You want a goodie bag, little Jane, little Johnny? I'll get you one on your MFing birthday and get out my house. Right? We gave them too much of a voice. We tell kids that they're old enough to pick their gender, and we tell them that men can get pregnant and have babies, and you can be a girl one day and a guy next day. And then we locked them down in their houses during COVID. We strapped masks on their faces. We kept them 6 feet away from their friends and told them if they caught COVID, they would die. And we did all this shit while shoving, drugs down their gullets and blaming everything on Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin and AR-15s. And then we're wondering, how did we get here? Why are people shooting up, grocery stores and malls and schools? Well, it's because we have a effing mental health problem in this country. And it goes all the way back to you guys destroying the nuclear family. Because being married is not cool. It's just, anyway, so the last point, and I got a question for Roger. And the American pharmaceutical industry spent $92 million lobbying the federal government in the first quarter of 2021. The first quarter. The House Oversight and Reform Committee published a report from 2016 to 2020. Big Pharma spent $56 billion more on stock buybacks and dividends than they did on research. Think about that. $56 billion more on stock buybacks and dividends than they did on research. They don't want to get you healthy because you being sick makes them money. And we're doing all this. The NRA, in comparison, because NRA, everybody's, ranting against the NRA, obviously, because, they apparently all these mass shooters have been big NRA members. Not. The NRA spent $2 million lobbying the United States government. Big Pharma spent 56, spent 92 million. Anyway, so for Roger, I know I talked a lot, and I'm going to stop talking for a while. How do we get everybody to dial back the rhetoric, and how do we get everybody back on, as Luke said, to talk about, hey, this is the root of the problem, right? We're talking about police SOPs, and we're talking about, doors being propped open, but how do we get the country back to talking about the root problem, the root cause that we have?
I don't know that you can collectively. I mean, it's almost got to be a grassroots movement, because I think you hit everything on the head. It's not about the weapon, right? We've said this a million times. It's not about the weapon. Okay. It's the person behind it. It can be a knife. It can be a car. It's on Twitter, I'm like, so now do you ban cars? Do you ban alcohol? For people, drunk drivers that kill people and this and that? Of course not. You don't do that. It's about the individual, not necessarily about the weapon, because they're going to find a way, regardless of what you ban, outlaw, whatever. But I think it takes a grassroots movement, and I say grassroots down to the smallest level, where us as parents have to take responsibility. And I've said this, and it started way before Barry, but I've said this for a couple of years now, that one of the failures of Barry's presidency was taking away your right to fail, and their shift of responsibility from the individual. And you see it in everything, right? You see it in abortion rights. You see it in gun rights. I mean, you see it in everything. You shift the responsibility away from the individual. You shift responsibility away from the parents, right? You shift the responsibility away from personal responsibility and social and cultural initiatives that take that responsibility away from that lowest level. It's always somebody else's fault. And hey, you know what? Maybe it's because you're a shitty parent. Maybe I don't want my 5-year-old on medication, unless there's obviously some there's some situations where the kid has to be medicated. Okay, that's clear. I'm not talking about that. But hey, if your kid's a little hyper and this and that, maybe you don't need to put them on Ritalin at 5 years old. And obviously, we don't speak from this as doctors or whatever, but my parents, hell, I didn't take anything growing up. My parents were like, yeah, ain't happening. Rub some dirt on it and you'd be all right. Get in the backyard and run around a little bit. And then growing up with my kids, we've done the same thing. We don't put them on meds for anything, and they tend to have turned out pretty decently. And so again, my point is, it goes back to individuals as parents, because sometimes you just have shitty parents. Like, my kid's hyper. I just need to put him. I need to put him on meds. I can't handle my 5-year-old. And that's when you look at what the left's doing and what the Democrats are doing. It's this push for, well, just more laws. They're not addressing the responsibility issue of it. And that's with everything. 99% of our problems is responsibility. Donald Trump said it. He came out the other day and he made a tweet, and I can't remember exactly what it was. It wasn't tweet, it was his Truth Social, that was talking about the nuclear family, basically, right? And now the left has come out everywhere like, no, that has nothing to do with it. It's fine to be a single parent. It's fine to be a single mom. It's fine to be a single dad. And we're not saying that every kid that grows up in a broken household ends up being a dirtbag. That's not the case. You've got plenty of cases out there where the kid comes out and does great things. But I'm venturing to say, and I haven't Googled any of this stuff or whatever. I think Josh threw a bunch of numbers out there. But, statistically speaking, growing up in a nuclear family, you probably have a higher probability of success. That's just common sense tells that to me. But he comes out and says that, and the left automatically jumps all over him. And so we never get to the root cause, because you have this political piece of this that just wants to push their agenda, because the Democrats and the left hate the Second Amendment and they hate the Constitution, and they're going to take any chance that they can to chip away at it. When you have a serious issue here with personal responsibility and personal accountability, not just at the individual level, at a parental level, and then also as a society. Looking at this kid right here, and again, I don't know how many Facebook friends he has and this and that, but Luke said it, it was spot on. Josh can post something on our Twitter account, telling somebody to go F themselves, and he will get banned within 2 minutes. 2 minutes, he's already been reported and banned. So now you've got a kid here that makes these posts at least 30 minutes prior. And then when you look at making the post, carries out the act, drives to the school, you got to assume there's got to be at least 40, 45 minutes. Like nobody saw that because nobody wants to take any responsibility for anything. And I'm not saying red flag laws, hey, go call somebody and we're going to take his guns and this and that. But it's like, hey, look, if my son came home and he was all pissed off at his employer and dude, because he hates painting, right? And so his boss has him paint, and Caleb's like, I can't paint any more daggum fences, whatever. And he gets all pissed and takes his gun out. Guess what? I'm calling the cops. I mean, it's what you do as a society. That's what we have to do. And I hate to use this term, but as a society, we have to police each other. And maybe it's not police each other. I hate that term. It's we have to look out for each other. We have to look out for each other, as a neighbor, as a community. People know what's going on. Nobody, and I've yet to read where somebody just randomly picks up something, goes out and does something. Right? This horrific. There are indicators there. People know about it. And maybe that time period is only 10 minutes, maybe it's 20 minutes, maybe it's 30 minutes. But I would venture to say here, with what he initially posted on Facebook, a whole lot could have been done. And maybe even meeting him, and especially Uvalde. I mean, you probably know more about this than we do, Luke. I'm assuming it's a fairly small town, or is it a small town or a big subdivision? Kind of in between. So, I mean, there's probably some people that can react to that pretty daggum quick. But we'll never get to the root cause because it's all the things that Josh mentioned. You're going to have the left and the right, the Republicans and the Democrats are going to politicize this thing. It's going to be an extreme one way or the other. And then, just ultimately comes back to personal responsibility. Nobody wants to be responsible for anything. It's always something else's fault. We never go back to, step one. And I've always said that's, I've been preaching this for the last couple months. That's the Democrat strategy. The Democrat Party strategy is to skip over step one, go to step 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. That's who we're going to place the blame on, not the individual, not your own personal responsibility. I'll throw it to Luke because I know he's probably got a few more things to say on this. And I actually had a question about, there are a lot of people, and we've said this jokingly, kind of tongue in cheek a little bit, not really jokingly, but there are a lot of people that hate the Second Amendment. Clearly, there are a lot of people that hate the Constitution. And I just don't understand it because it's like, like Josh mentioned early on, people are emotionally charged. But at one point it's like, dude, I mean, people out there hate everything we stand for, and I guess they're just uneducated and they don't know what our Constitution, says. They don't know the whole point of it. They don't know the purpose of it. You even have the president getting up there. Well, you don't need to shoot a deer with an AR-15. Well, you know what? That's not really why the Second Amendment was created. Right. So I guess, two things. One, get your final thoughts on that, as far as the responsibility piece of it, getting down to the root cause. But, this whole two-way Constitution, I mean, we're getting to a point where, I almost feel like a lot of these pundits on the left, it's like they just want to burn the whole Constitution down. Just forget it. And then what?
Well, I think that people hate what they don't understand many times. I think that's a truism throughout history. Is if you don't understand something, that tends to make you either not like it, ignore it, or just straight up hate it. That's where a lot of racism comes from. That's where a lot of violence comes from. Is that very thing? I'm all about it. Hey, bro, you want to get rid of the Constitution? You want to get rid of this amendment, that amendment, whatever? Okay, man. Going a little far afield here. We'll get back on track. But hey, Convention of States, let's do this, man. Let's do this. I am rubbing my hands together like this, looking for a Convention of States, man. Let's do it. It's about that time anyway. Michael Moore saying, let's get rid of the Second Amendment. It's just, again, they don't understand it. I think they're sheltered. Goes back to a lot of the stuff that Josh was saying. We've been a sheltered society for quite some time now. No accountability, no resiliency, so on and so forth. now I'm about to go off like Josh, so I'll spare you all that. Josh, Josh made it to almost 20 minutes, folks. That was impressive. I'll tell you what. He didn't really stutter or play around too much. He made some really, really good points. I think that putting the SSRI antidepressant genie back in the bottle is going to be very difficult to do. It would be akin to trying to put the alcohol, that demon alcohol genie, back in the bottle like they tried to do during Prohibition. I think we're stuck with it. I don't think it's not going to fix itself, so on and so forth. I've been hearing this stuff. I heard it on Joe Rogan. I've seen it come up in Facebook feeds, and I've seen stories on ketamine treatments for depression and anxiety. Man, ketamine is a horse tranquilizer. And people are talking about like, oh yeah, I did this ketamine treatment at my doctor's office. Oh man, it just alleviated it. Ketamine. It's like, how far down this hole are we going to go? And I mean, everything, as if, during COVID, as if it didn't make the three of us and our audience question just about everything that was being shoved down our throats. I think where they jumped the shark with me on COVID, because I'm listening to this COVID talk as we all did, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't believe that. It's not reasonable, but I can understand how people might be buffaloed by this particular narrative about COVID. But where they jumped the shark on the COVID with the pharmaceutical industries was when they started saying that antidepressants like Prozac were good for COVID treatment. I was like, okay, you've gone too far. You've gone too far on this. Now you're trying to push it. Oh, come on. It's too much. It's too much. They went too far. I've got so many notes here. And just, Roger, you hit it on the head with the grassroots movement. It's on us, man. It really is. And I'm again talking to myself just as much as anybody out there. I'm not a preachy type. I don't have my life 100% together. I'm trying to get there though. Josh said a lot about broken homes and accountability. Roger mentioned accountability. So did Josh. I'm sure that our audience, a lot of them have been divorced. There's stories that go along with all of these things. But in every case of divorce or a broken home, there is fault somewhere. And that requires self-examination. That requires, getting married to someone and starting a family is number one, it's a huge risk. Getting married is a big risk for both parties. If you're talking about like risk versus reward and, return on the investment, getting married is a huge risk. Having kids is an even bigger risk. It's huge. So, I mean, getting back to, accountability, responsibility, and resiliency. I mean, these things have to be taken seriously. We have to get back to what, the good book, if you will. Let's get back to wholesome, family values and things like that. Now, now I sound like a Joel Osteen or something. So I'll kind of back off of my Olstein, family values, 1950 Beaver Cleaver, but there is something to be said for that. I mean, I know not everything was perfect back then. Hell, half the housewives in the U.S. were on methamphetamine back in the 50s. It's crazy, man. But hey,
so was Aaron, just saying.
Yeah. Well, okay, that's enough. But hey, those houses were clean. Hey, those yards were trimmed. But look, man, the three of us have been talking a lot about being harder to kill. You've heard us say that over and over. We're just trying to get harder to kill. In your life, be harder to kill. But you know what? That's more than just getting your body in shape, man. That's more than just having some muscles and being able to get on the rowing machine for 10 straight minutes, going all out, man. The three of us have kind of discussed what being harder to kill means, and it's a holistic thing, man. It's not just body, it's body, mind, spirit. And these last two kind of tie into what Roger and Josh were just saying, family and community. Now, again, I am not preaching to the audience. I'm just saying it's on us. I'm trying to do a better job of getting involved in my community, like where I live, because man, I don't like people, bro. I don't. I mean, some I do, but somebody drives by. My wife is the best because somebody will drive by on their golf cart and they'll kind of slow down and wave and she'll just strike up a conversation with them. And that's good, man. I don't do that. I need to do that though. I need to get more involved in my community. I need to know what's going on. See, Roger's flipping me off, even though he
No,
said,
that's what Josh does. They drive by, hi neighbor.
"Oh my god." But see, you see what I mean. You get more involved in your community. If you see somebody in need, I mean, that's where, in my opinion, if we had strong communities, strong religious institutions, which I will include in community, which also wraps into spirit, I think that's where your social welfare needs to be rooted. There's no reason it shouldn't be rooted there. But all of us, myself included, have cocooned ourselves into our homes, into our own little lives, and we've kind of turned our back on the community as a whole. And I'm going to try to start getting better about that. And that's what I'm saying. I think the root causes, man, it's not going to be taking all the AR-15s off the street, Beto O'Rourke. It's not going to be shutting down the pharmaceutical companies, because you're just going to have a different set of problems, right? Um, if that kid didn't have an AR-15, or if he didn't have a weapon and he didn't go shoot up that school, would that have solved? I mean, it would have kept those kids alive. And my God, I wish that were the case. But down the road, that kid was not going to have a happy ending. There was not going to be a happy ending with that. Somebody was going to get hurt. Somebody was going to get hurt really bad. Now, it wouldn't have been school kids, and that probably would have been better. But still, the root cause wasn't the gun he went and bought. Now, Josh, I know you talked for 20 minutes and your mouth might be a little bit dry, but I'm going to ask you this because it's something I think about anyway. But, what about he passed a background check? Let's leave the pistol aside. I don't like the argument of, well, he was breaking gun laws when he did it. I understand that. The gun laws are on the books. They didn't stop him, though. It didn't stop him from acquiring a pistol. Where did he get all that money, by the way, to buy? God, when they said he went and bought 375 rounds of ammo, I was like, good Lord, what did he win the lottery the night before? But anyway, that's not my question. I mean, he passed the background check, but I've heard a lot of talk about, well, 18-year-olds, they should raise it to 21 to buy a gun. Okay, well, maybe they should raise the voting age to 21 too, which I would not be opposed to, by the way. Anything that makes voting harder, I'm for. Anything that, you know what I'm saying? So, I mean, what are your thoughts, Josh, just real quick, or you can go on another 20 minutes if you want, on, background checks, and should this kid have been able to buy a rifle, or so on and so forth? I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, if you even want to engage, if you want to just leave that alone, that's fine.
No, I'll answer it. Yeah, and I definitely didn't mean to rant for 20 minutes and take up 20 minutes. I just, everybody who listens to us knows who I am, how I am, and you guys know how I am. I start going, man, and sometimes it's hard to stop, and especially because I'm enjoying some Four Roses small batch select this afternoon. And so anyway, the background check, and he passed the background check. He purchased, from what I read. Again, I don't know this to be true. He obviously purchased at least one, but I saw where he purchased 2 Daniel Defense AR platforms. And like you said, hundreds of rounds of ammo, of 5.56. I'm like, bro, I need some 5.56. Like, dude, the cheapest I can find it is like 50 cents a round, which is criminal. But the background check, should he have passed a background check? Yes. Because when you go and you look at the NICS, which the NICS is it's a federal level background check that you go through when you purchase a firearm. It checks to see, if you have a criminal history. If you are 18 years old now, and if you're 18 years old and you have no criminal history, you are going to pass that background check, right? That background check does not sometimes take into account, let's say you're a juvenile and let's say you committed a crime when you were a juvenile, and that crime was expunged from your record, right? That may or may not show up on that background check. I'm not smart enough to know whether expunged records will show up on a background check or not. I do know from an employment standpoint, and Roger, correct me if I'm wrong, because I know you've dealt with this. You're hiring somebody and you do a background check on them. If they committed a crime as a juvenile and those records are either sealed or expunged from their record, they are not going to show up on any background check. Right. Also, if that individual is in therapy or on prescription medications for, let's say antidepressants, antipsychotic drugs, that is not going to show up on a background check. And this is, and we talked about this, I think last episode or, before that. Again, like, I'm torn a little bit. I'd say like 95, percent, 5%. I'm 5% like, man, it's really bad that, mental health records and treatments don't show up on background checks, but 95% of me is like, F that, because again, who gets to decide? Right? Who is the judge, jury, and executioner on whether to say, hey man, this person is bananas and they probably shouldn't, own a firearm. So an 18-year-old walking into a store, should they be able to buy a long gun? Yes. Why? Because the current law in the United States is at 18 years old, you are now considered an adult. All right, that's law. And if Congress doesn't like the fact that an 18-year-old can walk into a gun store and buy a long gun, well, Congress, you're the legislative branch, so maybe you can legislate and change the law if you see fit. But if you're 18 years old, you are legally considered an adult. You can now vote. You can now join the military. You can go overseas. You can get shot in the face, right, on behalf of whatever politicians happen to be sitting in, pick your chamber of Congress at the time or in the executive branch. Then you should be able to exercise your constitutional rights as they are upheld by the Second Amendment. If Congress doesn't like that, there's some states you can't possess or buy a handgun unless you're 21, right? Me personally, I don't think that's right. You should, at 18 years old, if we are considering that you are an adult, you are now allowed to participate in society when it comes to voting, then you should be able to exercise every single constitutional right that is enshrined, right? Which includes the Second Amendment. Now, we all know that most people, well, I would say most people, we all know that your prefrontal cortex is not fully developed generally until you're in your mid-20s. If we want to make the law and say you're not considered a legal adult until you're 25, okay, well then change the law. Let's have that discussion. But as long as you're 18 years old, and I mean, your constitutional rights, I'd say even the First Amendment, those apply younger because that's already been decided by the courts. And the high school cheerleader who, MF'd her high school on, it was either Snapchat or Instagram or whatever. She MF'd them because she didn't make the cheerleading team. They wanted to suspend her, and the court came back. This was actually a Supreme Court case. They came back and said no, her rant on her social media platform was protected by the First Amendment. Well, if we're saying that, if we're saying 18 is the is the adult age, you're legally considered an adult. You got to register with the Selective Service. Well, then you should be allowed to go purchase a firearm. And if you pass a background check, then so be it. If you want to change the background check, then let's have that discussion. So you wanted to ask a question, man. Throw it in there. I don't want to keep
couple things. Yeah, I would have no problem raising the age of all of this to 25 or whatever, because if you look back, 18 years old, being 18 years old in 1889 is a lot different than being 18 years old now. Way more mature, way more responsibility. You've learned more about the world than your average 18-year-old these days. I mean, it's pathetic. So yeah, I think that an 18-year-old now is maturity wise probably the equivalent of a 11-year-old in the early 1900s. So I have no problem with changing all that. None. Even the driving age, whatever, get over it. I know a lot of parents be like, no, hell no, 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 hell no, whatever. They're old enough to work, but they ain't old enough to drive. So, Josh, I guess the question I have for you or Roger, whoever wants to take it, is: would you guys have a problem with a state, for instance, coming out and saying, okay, yeah, you can legally purchase a firearm for sure, yes, but before you, and this could be taxpayer funded or it could be right out of pocket. Those are, I guess, two different issues. But before you are able to buy the firearm, you have to go through this training course. I don't know, whatever, 16 hours.
Yes.
And you would have a problem with that. Okay. And then,
Yes.
okay. So you're back to anyone should be able to own a firearm then. I'm just saying, look, I'm just, I had no problem with when Texas, when they had concealed carry, I had no problem with going through their certification course so that I was licensed to conceal carry. Because, I mean, yeah, I'm all about the Second Amendment. I know you guys think I hate it, but I saw the people going through that course, and boy, they needed that course plus another 40 hours of training because they're a danger to themselves and the ones around them. Again, I personally have no problem with with some sort of training course that you have to pass. I think that might weed out a lot of the non-hackers who do not have the stones to serve in my beloved, well-regulated militia. But I know that you're a purist, Josh, and you do have a problem with that. So I'd like to hear it.
So here's my problem with that. I think you're conflating a test for concealed carry to where you get to carry a gun in public, around everything. I think you're conflating that with my constitutional right to purchase and own and bear a firearm.
Can a
right?
blind person legally drive? I know that's not enshrined in the Constitution, but can a blind person, is it a good idea to let them drive a vehicle?
Again, you said it yourself. It's not enshrined in the Constitution, so I don't even know
Okay,
why you're even bringing that up as an example.
So Ted Bundy, for instance, if it was identified that he had those issues, and it's like, no, this guy is definitely not stable, should he be able to own a firearm? I mean, you got to draw a line somewhere, Josh. You can't just say everybody can own a firearm. That's not reasonable, and that argument will go nowhere. You have to draw a line. I know the Constitution says what it says, but I guarantee you, dude, some people should not own firearms. That's a fucking fact, man.
So I don't disagree that certain people should not own firearms, right? We should not allow people who are, let's go back to mental institutions before we decided to close the mental institutions and let these people roam free in society and then elect them to, Congress, right? People in mental institutions, I agree, should not be allowed to own firearms. If you are Corky from, I forget which show that was back in the day, yeah, maybe I shouldn't sell you a firearm, right? Maybe you shouldn't be allowed to own a firearm. If you're a convicted felon, maybe you shouldn't be allowed to own a firearm. That's in legislation. That's the law, right? Do I agree with it on certain cases? Yeah. Oh, you've been guilty of murder and you got paroled for whatever reason? Yeah, probably. Yeah. We should probably question whether you should own a firearm or not. Again, it comes back who gets to decide, right? Who gets to decide who gets to own a firearm and who doesn't, right? So people talk about, and I've seen this on social media, I don't know, a million times, and I'm exaggerating the number, right? People are like, we should treat firearms like we treat driver's licenses. Okay, again, driving a car is not enshrined in the Constitution. It's not a constitutional right. It's not an enumerated right. It's none of that. And so for me to carry, I have to do the same thing. For me to carry my concealed, firearm here in the state of North Carolina, I have to go take a class and I have to pass a shooting test, right? You go out to the range, you pass a shooting test. It's not overly difficult, for those of us who have handled, firearms. But here's my issue with that. Okay. So we make a test for you to be able to exercise your Second Amendment right. What's the test to exercise your First Amendment right? What test are now we going to put in place to exercise your Fourth Amendment right? What test are we going to put in place to exercise your 13th Amendment right? Because not all rights are absolute.
Did
Joe
I
Biden,
say it?
the
Did I
president of the
say a
United States,
test?
said
Did I say a test? I said a training course. I didn't say a test. And again, doing these
a
sweeping.
training course is you have to pass a shooting test, correct?
I said a training course.
Okay, so a training
I said a
course.
training course.
Did you
Look,
did
man,
you have to pass? Did you have to shoot at that training course?
look, I just said a training course. I said a training course. Would you have a problem with that? You said you did, and then you said that I said test, and I didn't. I
Okay,
said
so
I
training
did.
course.
I said I did like the concealed carry training course, test, whatever. I did say that.
Okay.
But doing the Josh, you're going to lose every argument, or not lose, but you're going to shut people down. I see this all over social media on both sides. You shut people down by saying, "Oh, well, what's the test for first, fourth, 13th, stuff like that?" Man, dude, there has to be some common sense injected into this thing somewhere. And like, who decides who goes to the mental institutions? I agree with you 100% there. We shut all those down during, your going back to the 1960s, and those have been, they've been shut down, and that's a problem. But who decides who's in the mental institutions? Look, man, I mean, I'm all about it. You guys know where I stand. Kyle Rittenhouse is a well-regulated militia, one-person well-regulated militia. I'm all about it. I'm all about it. But dude, to just dismiss everything that the other side is saying, you got to reasonably explain it and just be like, the Constitution says this. Dude, what do we say? They hate the Constitution. So you got to be reasonable about this stuff.
I don't think you have to be reasonable with people who are determined to put you in a COVID camp because you don't want to get a vaccine. I don't think you have to be reasonable with people who want to put you in jail because of what you say. I don't think you have to be reasonable with those people. So so you said training course. Again, what's a training course to exercise your First Amendment right? What training course do we have to take?
What did I just say, dude?
I know what you just said.
We're talking about the Second Amendment.
But you're
talking about the
talking about
Second Amendment, not the First.
But we're talking about
implementing it.
But you're talking
Do you have a
about
problem with
arguing
the state
with people.
implementing it?
Yes, because you're talking about people, right? You're talking about you're going to shut people down in an argument. Who are you arguing with? The people you're arguing with is the left, and the left, I don't know if you've noticed this, they're not reasonable people.
Okay, get ready, because 81 million people voted, and
No.
million, and the 81 million are going to take your guns away while you say burn it all down, and you're not going to do shit about it.
Check this shit out. 81 million votes.
You're going to rant and rave. You're going to rant and rave, and
81 million votes.
We need to bring back the mental institutions. They shouldn't have guns, but we don't have those, so everybody should be able to have a gun with no regulation whatsoever. Even what well regulated is in there. So whatever.
81 million votes, not 81 million voters.
Well, whatever. Doesn't matter.
So,
look who's in power.
Hey, man, check this out. Dude, an entire police force wouldn't go into school after one guy with an AR-15. What are they going to do against thousands of people with AR-15s? They ain't going to do shit.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you keep talking, man. They're gonna take your rights away slowly but surely because you are in your little corner lashing out.
They can have zero of my rights. I don't care how sad, scared. I don't how loud they shout. I don't care how angry they are.
What did we say the other day? You have no rights, dude. It's all an illusion. You don't have any rights.
Then why do you protect
That's something you tell yourself to go to bed at night.
Then why do you protect it so much? Then why do you fight for it so much? Why do you?
Because I'm an idealist.
But that idea is dead. It no longer exists.
So go and burn it all down instead of talking all that yang.
You sit there and you say, "Oh man, you ain't got no rights," but then you turn around and you defend the very institution.
You don't have any rights. They can take them. Well, you do have rights, but they'll take them away so fast your head will spin. The rights are the fact that you think you could freely exercise your rights in this country is an illusion.
The Bundys in Oregon would like a word with you. Let's see what Roger's got to say.
One case.
You know, it's funny as we talk about the mental institutions and all that other stuff.
Because Josh and I both belong in one.
Because believe it or not, I actually side with Josh on the thing. And California actually did implement some of that stuff, like I think with their hunting license for people under 21. But I think, Luke, you make a good argument for why I'm against that stuff is because, yeah, they're going to erode your rights piece by piece by piece. And I understand you have to come at it rationally because if not, they're just going to ban it all, right? But point being, when you look at the ATF form 4473, like this thing doesn't even make any sense. And our folks out there, they can go out there and Google it. They've already filled them out. Most of our listeners probably already own a weapon, and we've done this stuff anyway. But they talk about, are you an indictment, information, in any court for a felony, including military court? Are you fugitive from justice? Are you addicted to marijuana, depressants, yada, yada? So most of those things is verifiable except for the drug piece, okay, which is not really verifiable unless you have an offense. But it's crazy because question F, have you ever been adjudicated as a mental defective, or have you ever been committed to a mental institution? Well, one, if I'm crazy, I'm probably not going to answer that anyway, right? I mean, I'm crazy. If I'm nuts, I'm not going to check yes. I'm just going to put no on there. But it's the one thing, and there is no answer for this. I get that, but it's one of the only things on there that you can't verify. Like, I can verify if I was discharged from the armed forces under dishonorable conditions. I can verify if I'm subject to a court order. I can verify if I'm a felon. I can verify my U.S. citizenship. I can verify a whole lot of things, but the one thing you can't verify is the mental institution piece. And it kind of makes me wonder. It's like, why did they even throw that in there? You can't verify it. And if I am crazy buying this weapon, then I'm definitely not going to check yes, right? I'm going to check no. I'm crazy. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe we're all just a little bit crazy. But what I think the broader issue with this thing is we'll never get down to that. I don't think we'll ever get down to anything that's going to be effective as far as preventing this stuff going forward. Because, like we mentioned earlier, they don't want to actually talk about the issues. And right now, why this stuff is in the news so much outside of the obvious reasons. I think Luke and Josh, both of you, as we were texting back and forth, I mean, the fact that they were kids just makes it 100 times worse. But it's also a distraction, and I don't want to desensitize people to this, on how horrific the incident was. But when you look at this administration and what's going on, hey man, it's a change in the news cycle for them. And I tell you, this is what they are going to be on. This is what they're going to rant on for the next several months. Because you know what? You're not talking. Cause, hey, at the bottom line is this. You know what? They didn't give a shit about the kids at the southern border. They didn't give a shit about the kids. They didn't give a shit about the guns in Chicago. How many years we going on? They don't give a shit about any of those in Detroit. But what they can do is, what the Democrats will do is they'll take this incident here, and Josh just typed, yeah, they don't give a shit about the kids that they abort. Absolutely. They'll take this incident and they're going to use it as the distraction, because now the left and the Democrats finally have something that they can grab a foothold on. It's okay. Hey, maybe now we can have some traction going into the midterms. So my question, I'll throw it over to Luke. Do you think it's too soon? We're in what? We're at the end of May, beginning of June. Is this something that they can use to pick up steam and actually ride this into the November elections, or is it too soon? Because you always talk about the presidential election, the October surprise, right? And I think you can apply a lot of that stuff to the midterms as well. Is this something that carries on into the midterms, or do you think it dies out and they have to find something else?
Well, it depends. I mean, I said it's going to happen again. I think it'll happen again before the midterms. Bottom line. And yeah, I think that, but it depends on how close to the midterms. Because let's be honest, man, the news cycle moves so fast. The people who this is all they care about right now, this is all they're tweeting about. In 2 weeks, they'll be on to something else. Man, I mean, I couldn't even, honestly, they talked about the Buffalo shooter. I had to think for a second. That was 2 weeks ago. I had to think for a second. I was like, wait, what was that again? Oh, that was a white supremacy thing. That's right. I had to think about it because it was
Right.
2 weeks. So I think in another two, I think it's way too early to ride this one. That said, I think there's going to be another one. Not this bad, maybe, but I don't know. I think it's a losing fight on their part. You can't, especially in Texas. Beto O'Rourke, what he did was just the dumbest thing you could possibly do as a politician. It's not smart. Dude, and Andy flip-flopped. He said, hell yes, I'm going to take away your AR-15. Hell yes, I'm going to take away your AK-47 on that debate stage. And then about 3 weeks ago, I think 3 or 4 weeks, he totally backed off that. I'm sure you guys saw that. But you can't tell Texans that you're going to take away their guns and get elected governor. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. I think nationally, I think they're in the same boat. Again, that's why they have to be more reasonable. I know Josh and I kind of got into it. It's kind of fun to talk like that. But again, if they're going to make this an issue, they have to come up, the Democrats, that is, they have to come about it in a reasonable way to where you can convince someone that is on the right, has guns, but says, okay, you know what? Maybe bump stocks are stupid. Like that. They're going to have to approach it like that to actually get votes out of this. Same thing with the abortion deal. I mean, people have pretty much dug in their heels on that. So that was a long answer to a short question, Roger. I think it's way too early, but when the next one happens, we'll see. We'll see. But it's the economy, stupid. That's what's going to be important. It's the economy, stupid. Because, man, dude, I'm telling you, it is a tragedy that those kids got killed. It is a tragedy that whole thing happened. But you know what? At the end of the day, people where I live in Lubbock are still going to the grocery store, are still filling up their gas tanks. And that affects them more. I'm telling you, it does. It affects them more than those kids dying in Uvalde. Now, if you're a citizen of Uvalde, that's different, or even San Antonio. But go up to Omaha, Nebraska. Man, that's a real tragedy as I put $100 in the tank to fill it up.
What's on replay, right? You see it every single time
Yes.
that you put gas in. It's on replay, just constant loop.
And, going out and spending, $250 on groceries that, last year cost $100. So Josh, I mean, do you see this, same question to you. Well, how do you see this going and affecting the midterms, if at all?
I 100% agree with you. I think this one's too soon, but I think this is going to happen again. I think it's going to happen before the midterms. I pray it doesn't, but reality, shows that it is absolutely going to happen again. But and I agree with you as well that, this is something that, in a couple of days, the people in Uvalde and San Antonio are going to care about this. The people in Phoenix and Globe, Arizona, and the people in Apache Junction and the people, in Sioux City are not going to care about this. You're right, because they're struggling to put food on the table. They're struggling to put gas in their gas tank. And it's gonna be the economy. I think you're gonna have you still have the Supreme Court waiting to drop to drop those decisions. One on the New York gun case, and on the big abortion case, out of Mississippi. Those are going to be end of June, end of the session. They're going to ride that wave. They're going to ride that wave through at least July. And then into I don't even know that one takes them all the way to the midterm. So again, it's the news cycle. Give it a couple of days, something else will come up, and everybody will care about that. Nobody gives a shit about Ukraine anymore. By and large.
Are they still being invaded?
Yeah, exactly. Nobody cares about that. And and just to touch on it real quick, Luke and I have a little bit of a difference of opinion on certain things, especially when it comes to the Second Amendment and what we should do, what we should not do. And I have zero issues sitting down and discussing solutions with reasonable people. You take the church shooter in Texas in 2017. The Air Force, he had been charged and convicted of it was domestic assault or domestic abuse, one of those things, when he was in the Air Force. The Air Force never passed that information along to the FBI to put into the NICS system. He should not have passed a background check when he purchased his weapon. Right. And so it's those things that I think we have to address that first, address the laws on the books first, and see how they're, being enforced. At the end of the day, and people people say, well, this is politicizing it. And I say it's not. You have a private citizen who lied on their 4473, purchased a firearm, and then had their girlfriend dispose of said firearm in a trash can within vicinity of a school. Yet we're not prosecuting that private citizen. Now, why not? If you want to say, well, you can't buy a gun because you might have post-traumatic stress, or you went to see a behavioral health specialist, 20 years ago, one time, whatever, but yet you're not going to prosecute a private citizen who falsified a federal form to purchase a firearm, and then had somebody else who wasn't, who didn't purchase a firearm, throw it in a trash can outside of a school. If we're going to accept that, then you can go F off with all your opinions on gun laws. I know why we didn't prosecute that private citizen, because that private citizen's name is Hunter Biden. So until you're willing to enforce the laws that are on the books, I don't want to hear shit about new gun laws. I don't want to hear shit about your opinions. And I damn sure don't want to hear shit or what you think, about this, that, or the other. You can go F off with the rest of them. But common sense people who want to have a genuine conversation, people who are reasonable, I have no problem having a conversation with. But you're really, really going to have to convince me to give up my one last right that I have that will keep you from shoving me onto a train car. You're going to have to be very, very convincing before I'm willing to budge a centimeter on that right. So that's all I got for this episode. I'll throw it over to Roger. We can go around and close it out.
Yeah, you're spot on, and we didn't even get into of course there's the call on the federal assault weapons ban. I pulled some some stats up here, and there's studies that go back years that show that there's no evidence that the federal assault weapons ban had a significant effect on firearm homicides. And this, again, I think they're just all talking points, to try to get some political points, try to get a couple votes, but. Last thing I want to close out with before I kick it over to Luke is a little separate. One, we didn't even talk about the Michael Sussman case, which we need to do that on the next episode. I think we need to give a rundown because nobody's covering this stuff. Like, I don't even understand why the conservative media is not like shoving this down the consumer's throat, right? Because there's some pretty big news that's coming out. And I think they had closing arguments started on Friday. So hopefully we get a verdict. I'm assuming well, you're right, because they were complicit. Mainstream media has been complicit on this whole thing, but some pretty big news, in my opinion, that came out from it. I'll be kind of curious to see what the actual, what the actual verdict is. But two things before I throw it over to Luke. One, we're now sending our DNA and the human structure out into space. And I guess Luke, you can you can touch on this on your closeout or not or whatever. I don't know. That's such a great idea. Do you think that if there's aliens out there, right, and they're getting this stuff, it's like, do you think that's a good idea to kind of tell us, one, we don't even know if they're good or bad, right? And if they are getting this stuff and they can actually visit Earth, they're obviously way more advanced than where we're at. So I don't know, man. I see stuff like that. I think, Stephen Hawking even said it before he passed, was like, yeah, let's not do that. Let's not send how to, basically destroy the Earth, how to destroy the human race out to other aliens that may be looking for resources, kind of like out here in Arizona, we're looking for water or whatever. And then finally, I think I texted this a little bit ago, but man, I had to stop watching AEW, and it's not a boycott. I'm not saying people should boycott, but they had CM Punk come out there a couple days ago or a couple weeks ago, and he wore his abortionist healthcare shirt. And I try to be pretty consistent with some of this stuff. It's like, man, I don't like to have politics mixed in with my health or with my entertainment. And, the fact that Tony Khan and all them, obviously, because these guys come in, he's been wearing the shirt for a couple hours before the show starts and this and that. And Tony Khan and the company obviously thought that was all right. You want to alienate half your consumer base, if not more. That's fine. But it's painful because I was really digging AEW. We've talked about it several times on several different episodes, but that's it for me, man. It's like same thing with the NBA and all that stuff. Was like when they come out and do this, like I just can't support it. I can't do it anymore. So anyway, that's my final thoughts. Throw it over to you, Luke, to close us out.
Yeah, that was disappointing about AEW. That happened a few weeks ago. I saw that. And I think I immediately texted you, and you're like, I'm tracking. I could just the way the words read on the text message, I could see Roger was rolling his eyes. So yeah, as far as sending DNA into space, they also send like naked pictures of humans into space. It's like, God, any alien civilization that's out exploring and maybe happens across that and finds it, they are so far advanced, they would view us as like ants. And it's like, what do we do with ants? We study them, we burn them with magnifying glasses. We think it's
Right.
fun to, burn down their mounds and stamp them out and, whatever. Just little nuisances. So yeah, I don't think that's a good idea, man. Let's just let's focus on us. You know what I'm saying? A little good news out there. Liz Cheney, that rhino low T liberal, is behind by 30 points. I am just looking
Oh,
forward
good
to it.
Lord.
Yeah, it's bad. I just tweeted at her from our account, hey, I wish I lived in Wyoming so I could vote against you. Oh, she's just so awful.
Yeah, she's getting pounded harder than Kamala Harris.
Yeah, yeah. Well, but Liz Cheney's not going to get much out of it. So
Nope.
yeah, she's not. Well, I mean, it's a little too early to say she's not going to be vice president. Oh my gosh. Oh man, Liz Cheney, can she just go away? And I'm glad that George P. Bush just went away. That guy, I met that dude, and I was, I made the mistake of approaching him and asking him about an issue or discussing an issue with him, and that dude was looking straight through me. He was looking straight through me. He is such a politician. It was kind of slimy and disgusting. But anyway, so he's looks like the Bush dynasty is coming to a close, maybe. So I'm going to post an L here. We post W's, about getting in shape all the time, the three of us. We do it for accountability purposes. And I told the guys that this week I was going to try to do 53-minute rounds on the hanging heavy bag with 1 minute rest. Well, guys, I only did 40. Yesterday I was
Such a
like,
loser.
my hands hurt too bad. My legs feel like mom's spaghetti. I just wasn't having it. So maybe I'll do that today. I don't know, but encourage y'all to get in shape out there. Body, mind, spirit, family, community. Man, it all comes together, and hold us accountable. And Josh is typing something. I want to see what he types before I close this out. Maybe kick it to him. He's not. Vomit on the sweater already. That's right. It was straight up Eminem. Straight up Eminem. If I would have got on that bag yesterday, it would have been ugly. So again, thanks to Carlton Zeus. Thanks to all our listeners. Thanks for sticking with us this 2-hour podcast. This was a good one. And Josh and I love each other. We just gave you kind of behind the scenes on what our text messages look like. So until next time, Canteeners, keep your canteen cup full and tightly secured.